Welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. My name is Jerry Snyder. As a health, wellness, and sports performance coach, my goal each week is to bring you experts to help you take control of your health and build your self-confidence. Thanks for including me today on your journey to better health. I want to say thank you to Social Media Cowboys for sponsoring this week's episode of the Confidence Through Health podcast. If you need help with a website, if you need social media needs for your business, if you need help with AdWords, SEO, all those things that you know you should be doing, but you are too busy to do or you're too confused about, they are the experts that you need in your corner. If you're interested in launching a podcast, such as mine, they help me edit my podcast and do a fantastic job making sure that all of the technical side of it is handled and we launch a nice, neat, edited podcast episode each week. So I want to thank Social Media Cowboys for their continued sponsorship of the Confidence Through Health podcast. You can find them at socialmediacowboys.com, or you can find them as well with other sponsors at confidencethroughhealth.com. Well, Cliff, I want to thank you for being a guest on the Confidence Through Health podcast.
Thank you, Jerry. Excited to talk today.
So for our listeners, like, your background is pretty diverse. Like, you've done a lot of different things. Musician, author, like, you're getting into the wellness area and living through your own example of changing your life in doing those things. And so there's a lot to you. So, like, to get off with maybe a deep question, but what drives you?
Uh, Anxiety, I think.
Yeah.
Um, in a good way, though. I tell, like, my therapist and stuff, I was like, sometimes when you have ADHD, hyperactivity, people see those as deficits. I see them as
Yeah.
blessings because they force me to really want to do more and
Yeah.
be more. And I think we underestimate what we can do.
Right.
You have to kind of I think Les Brown said, you shoot for the moon and you hit the stars. The
Yep.
reason to do that is because you get so much farther when you make a big, hairy, scary goal. And it also will require you to have some type of community, to build a tribe, to work with a team, to work with people.
Right.
Everyone thinks that you can do it on your own, but you can, but not to the level you can with people. You
Right.
need people to make that work.
Yeah.
But yeah, what drives me, I just try to be the best I can be and push that better every day,
Yeah.
whatever that is. And
Right.
to do it in a way where people always talk about work-life balance or balance. And now what people are saying is this theory of work-life integration. I'm trying to
Hmm.
integrate my life to make everything congruent and build ecosystems to make it work for
Right.
me. And
Yeah.
that doesn't work for everybody. But we live and die by systems. Our
Yep.
body is a system. And so it's like the more you can say, where can I delegate? How should I focus on productivity? What should I do first? How can I, snowball with baby steps to build momentum, that type of thing. So I'm
Yeah.
always thinking about the drive. I guess really the gnawing question for me when I wrote my book, Side Hustle and Flow, and now focusing on the new book, Shape Up, the same question still plagues me as it has my whole life.
Mhm.
Why is one person's life great and someone else is not?
Right.
Why is this person achieving and this person doing? Why are we all doing the same thing but getting different results?
Yeah.
Why do I wear a cologne that smells great on me and terrible on you? I don't
Yeah.
know, but that's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out. So what drives me is just this nagging curiosity of like, why did that person do this and lose weight? And why did this person gain weight?
Yeah.
Why did this person get healthy? This person didn't. Why is this person sick? This person didn't. And there's so many anomalies of like your background and environment and certain things. But
Yeah.
success leaves clues. And so
Yeah.
my job is to go and figure out clues. And then just realizing that when you're writing books or doing music, whatever it is, people don't have the lifespan to make all those mistakes. Like
Oh,
Edison
yeah.
took 10,000 experiments to make the light bulb. I get to enjoy that. I cannot spend 10,000 hours or 10,000 on that. So
Yeah.
it's like live through me in the way of like, let me tell you what didn't work. And you
Yeah.
can just not do that and then figure out from what works for you. And maybe some of
Well,
the things, whatever, but that's what drives me. It's just like,
yeah.
oh, how can I be better? And then how can I help other people be better?
Yeah. Well, and I love that concept because I've heard so many people say, like, pick up somebody's book because they have written down, if for a nonfiction, right? Like, fiction books, okay. I mean, that's great to read too, but if somebody's writing a nonfiction book about their experiences in their life, they're telling you the mistakes that they've made,
Hmm.
right? Like they're laying out the blueprint of this is how I lost weight or developed this program or, achieved this in this area of like they're giving you like the hints to say, don't make all these mistakes.
Hmm.
Like it's a fast forward button,
Yeah.
right?
And
So it's
also with that, when you talk about them giving their experience, one of my biggest pet peeves or things that just frustrate me is when someone gives me theory. Like someone was like, let me help you with dating. I was like, but did you figure out with your partner what you want to do? They're like, I'm figuring it out. I was like, when you are successfully married
right.
for a while, come back to me, tell me about it.
Yeah.
Don't tell me about it when you don't know, because you could tell me what you heard, but you
Yeah.
don't know. And
Right.
that's why I was like, I never talked about health till I lost the 50 pounds, because I was like, I'm not going to tell you how to lose 50 pounds when I'm still sick.
Right.
Like it's
Yep.
just not helpful. So,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there's ways that people do that. Like I'm sure there are doctors who are unhealthy that can give you good information, but I don't think that's the best vantage point. So
Yeah.
for me, I'm always guinea pig. I'm patient zero, and I will then tell you, like I'm an expert on like how to get out of this situation. This is
Yeah.
what I did.
Yeah. So what motivated you to finally say, okay, I know I'm 50 pounds overweight and I need to make a change?
Well, luckily, I've always worked with doctors that are very polite, so they never said I was fat. They said I was too short. I mean, it still hurts my feelings, but
Right. Yeah.
the main thing is that with the medical system, Western medicine, no fault of the doctors, but essentially, I had 5 years ago became sober. They told me that I had type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and actually, the precursors of that. Years before that, they were like, "You have fatty liver, and you have this," and you hear
Mhm.
these things. They're like, "Oh, just avoid this food, that thing." I didn't think much of it, and eventually, like I tell people, your body will whisper to you until
Mhm.
eventually it screams at you. But by the
Yeah.
time it screams at you, it's too late. And so with the doctors, they're just like, they're triage, right? You go there, they're like, take these pills, good luck.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was trying to tell the doctor, I want to get off pills. I actually have a problem swallowing pills. I started with two, then three, then four, then five.
Ooh.
When they went to put me on the six, I had a reaction from something. And then it was like, well, I cannot take this. And I was like, but you're telling me I need it, but I can't take it. And there's no real alternative. So the only alternative is for me to just fix this. I just need to like battle
Yeah.
it out. And so the crazy thing was though, is that the doctor never, like the doctor was just like, you need to lose weight. Well, no, no crap, of course.
Yeah.
Tell me what I don't know. But they
Right.
never told me how to do it.
Yeah.
And so for years I was like, what do I do? So finally I was like, you know what? I'm going to go through the insurance, find a dietitian. And I was like, I'm going to find someone who tells me about nutrition and what I need to do. And that's what I
Yeah.
did. And then they put me on this aggressive plan. And they're always like, you can eat whatever you want as long as it's on this list. You need to
Mhm.
want what's on this list, and you need to
Yeah.
want it in the quantities I told you. And so, having all that accountability, knowing I have to show up and tell this person, vulnerably what's
Right.
happening, forced me to be like, well, I'm not going to come back in 3 weeks and be like, I gained 5 pounds because I kept eating fast food. So I have to make changes. But then
Yeah.
from there, they were like, you gotta do intermittent fasting. You gotta track your eating. You build all these habits, and they seem hard. So now people see me, they see me in smaller clothes, they see me looking younger, and they know that I've reversed a lot of all these illnesses. I'm not taking any
Right.
medicine over the last year. But when I tell them like, well, I did these 6, 8 things, they're like, it's too hard. I'm like, it
Oh
is
yeah. Yeah.
in that way. And so not everybody will do it. It's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
But when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, or you're willing to now realize you're your best advocate
Yeah.
and you need to write the prescription for your life, then you'll do that. But
Yeah.
also, I needed to, in the integration style, I need to understand the Western and Eastern philosophy. So I picked up a lot of Eastern doing Qigong, doing acupuncture, but also just stuff about one, there's a lot of myths, like a lot of
Yeah.
stuff about food. You just know incorrectly, or you just
Right.
did what people told you and you don't know why. And then also like hydration, sleep, like these things you forget, but it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, if you hydrate properly, you won't eat as much and your body needs that hydration. You're like 75% water, 80% water. And then sleep, if you don't sleep, like people think, oh, I have a sleep debt, I can make it up. You can't.
Yeah.
If I
You
sleep
can.
six
Yeah.
hours, then I sleep 10 hours, that doesn't work. And
Yeah.
also, your body doesn't recognize that. And then I didn't know that if you don't sleep for a long period of time, you gain weight. Like you
Yep.
gain about 2 pounds from not having like hours of sleep. So
Yeah.
it's like little things, but you underwhelm yourself. You make these little baby steps, little changes, and they are hard in the beginning. But then when you build the habits, like now I look back at my fitness pal tracking my food. I've tracked my food with a streak of over 550 days.
Yeah.
It's like once you've done that, and the accountability is important because you think, but you don't know, and the data
Oh, yeah.
lets you know. Oh, I thought I was eating the regular 2,000 calories. I probably was eating 3,500.
Right.
I cut to 1,500, then people think, oh, that's too restrictive. But I was never hungry
Yeah.
because I was eating nutrient rich, less caloric, calorie
Yeah.
food.
Yeah.
And it's just a learning curve of figuring it out. And it's trial and error. Like we talked about quitter's day and resolutions. I don't believe in that. I believe in lifestyle changes
Hmm.
and integrating it into your life and making it flexible and work for you. So
Yeah.
if you don't want to cook, then you have to learn like when you're eating out, what are the lesser of two evils, the better things
Right.
to order and that kind of thing.
Right.
Because it's like you're not going to stick to it. Excuse me. You're not going to stick to it. Like if you don't like sardines, I'm going to make a whole menu where sardines are on the menu. You're not going to eat it. So
Right.
you just have to learn what works for you. Just like we learn to dress for our body types and shapes,
Yeah.
you have to find what works for your emotional state.
Yeah. Well, and I love that because there's so many different things out there, whether it's food related or like exercise related. Like there's so many different ways to get there, right? Like it's
Oh,
not
so
like
many.
I can imagine like you didn't get a list of foods. It was like you have to eat green beans and broccoli and carrots every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like because there's so many different ways to get the vitamins and minerals and things that are in those foods
Yeah,
that if you were like, I don't like any one of those three,
yeah.
right? Or like, quote unquote allergic to, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not it actually, hurt you or you had this aversion to them just because of something that happened earlier in life. Like there's so many other options out there.
So
And
many.
so making it personal to you and being able to say, okay, one, like, okay, well, maybe I do need to work on portion control, which is, I think, the vast majority of the issue for a lot of Americans is just simply like you said it, like you didn't realize you were eating as much as you were simply because portion control is out of control in this country, or portion
Yeah.
size like is out of control. Like the amount of
Always.
food that you get at a restaurant is ridiculous.
Yeah. And they're meant, that's why a lot of societies that are more communal, they eat together.
Hmm.
When you're talking and communicating over the meals, you eat less because
Yeah,
you have the time, the mindfulness of being satiated. There are other cultures that are like, we eat till we're 80% full. It's just a
yeah,
part of it. Ours is not like that. Ours is like, get all you can, the most you can. Is
right.
have it your way, get what you want. It's like, well,
Yeah,
yeah, but we're obese. And also there are other cultures where they will just tell you you're fat. Like we won't because
right,
it's
right.
impolite, but it's like, but not from a place of malice, a place of
Mhm.
love. Like you need
Mhm.
to lovingly encourage someone and correct them. Like if you saw a child sticking their finger in the light socket, you're gonna say something, right? But
Right.
it's like we need that as for the community.
Yeah,
Like it's like I was sick a long time. I could have been healthier a lot earlier. If people were like, what's happening with you? And I think it's the questions that you ask yourself, but the questions you ask, like no one ever asks you. Like people think, how are you? But they never ask like, how are you feeling? How are you
yeah,
dealing with this emotion? What's happening here? Like
yeah.
eating, like when I was becoming sober and you go through 12 steps or all these types of programs, you have to ask a lot of inventory questions of yourself. And it's like, well, you're just masking through alcohol or cigarettes or drugs or whatever, or sex or overeating. You're just masking something else. If
Yeah.
you're doing that because you're being triggered, because you're in a bad relationship or dealing with a trauma or dealing with grief or dealing with whatever, you have to get to the root of that. Even like a doctor or a surgeon, like if you have something and they need to go in there and cut that and excise that out, it
Mhm.
hurts in that moment. It sucks, it's painful, and the recovery is a process. But then when you're fully healed, then it's done. So I tell people
Yeah,
now with therapy and other stuff, getting the emotional weights off me helped me then manifest the outward manifestation of losing the weight.
yeah,
Because for years I wasn't losing the weight and I did a lot of the same things, maybe in a different sequence, but having that mindset and shift of like dealing with the things, the hurt,
hmm,
helped me then get over the hurdle.
yeah,
And I wasn't thinking about it that way, but it's like, oh yeah, like you get out of a relationship and you eat more. that happens.
Hmm.
Or you give up alcohol, but then you eat more. Like
Right.
you're not always prepared for
Yeah.
that. And then when you're aware of those um, challenges, like if it's you're like, oh, okay, when the month starts and I just got paid, like I kind of stay on task. But then, like as the money runs out towards the end of the month, then I start doing stuff that I didn't do at the beginning. Like you just have to start to recognize those patterns to
Right.
then figure out healthier ways to cope and other ways. But it's just there's no right or wrong way. You
Yeah.
have to just ask a question and then from the data, like figure out if it's right or not for you.
Right. Well, and on the emotional side, like, one of the things that I try to get people to recognize is like whether it's an obstacle or a trigger, like that's leading you down. And a lot of times those are emotional things that we don't want to deal with,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's like, oh, I just got triggered, and then you sit down and oh, where'd all that food go? Right? Like, oh, my pantry's empty now. Like, oh, I've got to go to the store, and maybe you have a conversation on the way to the store. You have a list, you have a great idea of like, I'm going to buy all these healthy things. You get triggered by something in a conversation on the phone on the way to the store, and all of a sudden you look at your grocery list and you're like, ah, it's out the window. Let me just get all the stuff on the shelf that looks appealing because it's advertised to me.
Yeah.
And it is like all of a sudden you're 4,000 or 5,000 calories more than you were expecting to eat for that week.
Mm-hmm.
And that adds up. And it's not necessarily like I can notice it this week type of thing, but it's like
Mm.
one day I wake up and oh my gosh, my pants don't fit anymore,
Oh yeah.
right? And it's like, what happened? It wasn't just one day. It
No.
was multiple times of avoiding. So a lot of times it's a multiple times of avoiding those emotional triggers and obstacles and looking to food for them.
Yeah. And it's who you are, it's who you're around, like what you surround yourself with,
Hmm.
what's around you. If you don't have those bad snack foods like in an arm's reach, then you won't eat them. If you don't bring
Right,
them into the house, then they're not there. If you don't drink, probably not a great idea to be sitting at the bar all day or have a house full of
right,
alcohol. There's things that you could do to that level and who you're with. When I go, I mean, people think it's rude, but if I go in a place, it's like I walk by a McDonald's and if I see only fat people there, well, it's like, well, that's where fat people eat. And then it's me, I'm mean. It's just
right.
like, there at the salad place, everybody wasn't that. So it's
Yeah,
like you just have to recognize maybe this is not the best place for me to be, for
yeah.
the goals that I have. And I think you have to then have goals, like if
Hmm.
you are at your goal weight, then but you have to know what that goal is. Am I
Yeah.
closer to the goal or further away from the goal? When I eat this, does that bring me closer to it or away?
Hmm.
Or at least just being mindful, like I'm choosing this thing that's off menu, but I've been really great the last week, then this is my treat to myself. But it has
Yeah.
to be a cheat or treat occasionally. It can't become all day, all the time, because then
Sure.
it's just a flow. So,
Yeah.
again, different people, different rules. Some
Yeah.
people, like I have friends that can eat a whole bag of Oreos and nothing. I think the myth, though, which I was telling someone earlier, was I was like, one myth is that you look at people who are skinny, you think they're healthy, but that's not always true. It's
Right.
like the blood work and the data will show that because they may be doing something totally different. Like
Yeah.
there are people who are very skinny, but they're like, drug addicts, so that might not be the healthiest thing. So, and
Yeah.
I'm not, like I said, nothing has anything to do with judgment. It's just asking questions and ascertaining, like, is this moving me towards the goal or not?
Right.
And knowing that your goals and what you do change, like
Hmm.
now that I've lost the weight, it's like, okay, well, maybe you want to go in the gym or maybe you want to build more muscle. Maybe you want to make sure you're having more protein or more whatever. I think in the same way, like I was overly medicated in certain ingredients, but people are overly supplemented. People
Yeah.
take a lot of vitamins and other stuff. It's like,
Right.
well, do you have a deficiency in that? Do you know definitively you need that? Also, what I learned from a doctor friend is he was saying people think, oh, well, this is medical grade vitamin A, or I'm taking this $100 one instead of the
Right.
$50. Your body knows no difference. There is
Yeah.
no way your body can be like, oh, that's a $50 vitamin A. It's just vitamin A, or it isn't. So
Yeah.
it's like that type of stuff needs to be like re-educated. And then just for me, I've really been focusing on people of color, men. There's all these subgroups of things where you're just like everybody deals with things differently. Everybody
Yeah.
has resources and access that are different. So there's a lot of empathy and awareness and then just overload of information. Like we
Yeah.
have podcasts and books and other stuff. You're like, everything's at a fingertip now. You can lightning speed get anything you want. ChatGPT tells you everything.
Yeah.
But now you just have too much information, too
Right.
much misinformation, and So books and stuff are great when they become a resource of like, you're not going to read the 100 books I did this year. Read this
Yeah.
one book and learn from 100 at once. Or even
Right.
now, people do book summaries and stuff. Whatever gets you just a little information, because you're going to
Mhm.
forget so much. So it's like I say, if you read it and get one idea and that moves you forward, that's enough. Like
Right.
you may only read one chapter that sticks out to you at the time. Because as you're at a certain place in your life or a different place, you will see a difference. So if you read
Yeah.
a book 10 years ago and then read it 10 years later, you might see a whole different perspective based
Oh
on like,
yeah.
oh, I can apply that information differently from where I am.
Yeah.
And so I don't, but I think people should just get um, the information and build the team around them as much as they can do. Just
Yeah.
start from wherever you are. But the
Mhm.
main thing is to know you need to start, and today is the day. If you keep saying someday, someday never comes. You got to get
Right.
off someday aisle, and today is the day.
Well, and so you've mentioned, your tribe, your team, and I think it's important for people to know that, like, yeah, you do need a group around you. Most of us do, right? In maybe not in every aspect of our life, but in most of them, we need a group around us, because if we're not successful in that area, we're still a novice. We're still trying to figure it out. And they're going to come alongside and say, "Oh, well, here's the dangerous foods, or here's, the, like you said, the vitamins. Here's the difference between da 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 da." And I was at the grocery store one time, just a couple of years ago, and looking at different vitamins. I can't remember which one, but I was looking at the different brands and trying to figure it out, because they were, a different level of grams in them. And so I'm like, okay, trying to figure out which one do I need, and the cost is different, trying to put all that. And the pharmacist comes over and he goes, "Dude, it's the same exact pill." And I was like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, it's the same exact pill. Came from the same manufacturer. They just put a different label on it." He's like, "Just pick the one that's cheaper. It's the same thing." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, seriously?" And he was like, "Yeah, 80% of like the standard, not the brand name stuff, of course, but just, if it's vitamin A, like 80% of it comes from the same manufacturer on the East Coast.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
it's coming out of the same building, just a different label on it. And so it's the same exact pill.
yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, go for the cheapest one you can get in a lot of cases, because it's the same thing. And it's in your body, like you said, it's going to recognize it and go, here's where it is. And so
Yeah.
getting those people, and sometimes those people are long-term people, and sometimes they're just in there for a short time, right? Like, it's like, I need this specialist to come alongside me for 6 months, and then, they're there for me to refer back to, but I don't have to contact them on a weekly basis or monthly basis anymore.
Yep, exactly. That's how I was with my dietitian too. And yeah, I think the thing is when you have those decision points, it gets tough because you sometimes if people don't know what to do, then like they don't do anything. Like
Mhm.
in Christianity, like a church, people are like, well, with tithing, like, do I give from the gross or I give from the net? Like, just
Yeah.
give at
Right.
any level. You're
Yeah.
you're focusing on that and you're doing nothing, and
Yeah.
that's not good. And so it's like I think for me, I had a similar moment in the grocery store, but for me, it was the frustration of I had these two types of olives. And I was like, these are organic and a little bit more. And I look at the ingredients, it's just like olives and brine and salt. It's like, cool, I get it. And then
Yeah.
the other one was like olive, same company, but the cheaper inorganic. And they were like, oh, this is has yellow five and this bentonate or whatever. And I was like, why? Why would a company who has literally the access to make this
Yeah.
more superior product choose to make an inferior product? Why are you looking at a farm and you're like, this will be good and this will be crap? Like,
Yeah.
why would you do that? And our country allows that. Other countries don't.
Right.
They don't accept our food in there. Like when I talk to people from Europe or Asia or Africa, they're like, what is organic? Like it either came from the ground or it didn't. Like there's
Right.
such a foreign concept.
Yeah.
And so I just hope that, like, if we used our buying dollars more powerfully to
Hmm.
force these companies to be like, we can get these organic ones to be the price of the other ones if more
Yeah.
people bought them and get used to those tastes
Right.
and get used to just more natural, less processed things.
Yeah.
But because they're like, oh, we can make it cheap. Like it's like even people like if you're gonna have a Coke, a Mexican Coke with cane sugar is better than a high fructose
Right.
Coke, but and they taste better and you know
Oh
the
yeah.
difference.
Yeah.
But it's like there was a time where we didn't do that. I mean, Coke used to come as a treat. You didn't
Yeah.
have it every day, and it was in a smaller bottle. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you can literally look back at old photos, like you look at the 50s, 60s, bathing suits, 70s. Everyone was skinny. Like there
Yeah.
was no obesity epidemic
Right.
because the food was normal. You didn't eat all day. You didn't eat all the time, and you mostly cooked at home. And
Right.
the restaurants were treats. Like my grandparents would, we'd have to beg. Maybe an
Yeah.
anniversary or a birthday, they'd take us out, but
Yeah.
they were like, "We have food at home." That was like the recurring. We have food at home. And now as an adult, I'm like, "I have food at home. Why am I going out?" So,
Right.
but make it simple for yourself. I use the slow
Yeah.
cooker a lot. Set it and forget it. Or Men's Health, they have what, a man, a can, a plan. A woman can
Mhm.
do it too, but it's just like make it easy. Like
Yeah.
I don't make crazy meals. I don't make meals that take a long time. But it's like the slow cooker is great. You dump it in there, you let it cook all day, you come home, the soup's done, and
Right.
it's still better than, I mean, it's cheaper, more
Mhm.
economical, but also just you know what's in it,
Yeah.
and you have a connection. When I'm chopping vegetables or whatever, it's work, but it's like I earned it. I
Yeah.
earned that food, and it's always better than the restaurant. But again,
Yeah.
if you're going to be at a restaurant, just knowing, like, for me, like I do a lot of meatless meals, even though I eat meat, because it's better for the environment, but also it's
Right.
better for you. Like
Yeah.
it forces you to eat more vegetables, and so I'm like, oh, that's cool,
Yeah.
or like, oh, I'll have fish instead of or chicken instead of beef. And it doesn't mean that you never have any of the other things. It's just like
Right.
you're more cognizant, you're more
Yeah.
aware,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Well, and I've heard so many people talk about the the key to changing the obesity, problem in America is in the kitchen, in the fact that so many people don't know how to cook and they think it's too hard. And and part of it could be social media, but obviously another part of it is restaurants are so abundant now. And so you go somewhere and you're like, oh, I could never cook something that looks this nice or maybe that tastes this way. And it's like, but that doesn't matter, right? Like
Hmm.
you can cook simply, you can cook easily, you can cook quickly and have a nutritious meal in your kitchen. And like you said, there's a piece of it that like the emotional side of cooking, and especially if you've got a family and you can talk and work through it together and chop things together and like put it together, there's a bonding piece of that you don't get if you just go to the restaurant and sit and order off the menu and everybody's looking at their phone.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when you talk about families, I mean, I don't have kids of my own, but I think what I've learned is like when you're a kid, especially those first 5 years, what you absorb, it
Hmm.
carries you through a long part of life. So when you're like, oh, like I had a rough day at preschool or whatever, oh, I have a cookie. It's like, well, that creates a Pavlov's dog. You become
Right.
salivating, realize, oh, when I have a bad day, I have a cookie. And then I
Yeah.
had a lot of bad days. I had a lot of cookies, and then eventually I'm 50 pounds
Yeah.
overweight, because it's like that's what I learned, but no one
Yeah.
tells you that. But
Yeah.
but I'm like, oh yeah, like no one was like, have a glass of water. You had a bad day,
Right.
walk it off.
Right.
Oh, that could have been a different experience. Have an apple, but they didn't.
Right.
It's like, yeah, because it becomes ingrained in you. It becomes a habit.
Oh
It's like
yeah.
you make a bad habit, but you're not thinking that way, making a
Yeah.
habit. But it's just like, and it's like you learn, you trace that back, and you're like, well, when I was a kid, that's what I did, and when my mom was a kid, that's what she did, and when her mom was a kid, that's what they did. And then you go back, you're like, well, there was no real reason to do it. It just became
Hmm.
like, I'm busy and I don't want to deal with this, and a cookie will make you stop
Right.
talking, that kind of
Right.
thing. And it's not
Yeah.
a bad way. I mean, parents, we do the best we can.
Yeah.
Everybody does, but it's just like, oh, retraining and making a new habit is a lot harder than when they're a kid making a good habit. Like a
Yeah.
kid who learns, a kid that learns the value of work, like, oh, I need to do extra things outside of chores. Like this is because I'm a part of the household. This is something else. I need to give. I need to save. I need to
Right.
earn, whatever. Like teaching those early just they just become set up for success. How can
Yeah.
we set each other up for success? And community helps us to do that. Like, why aren't we learning who's doing it right if
Hmm.
we're doing it incorrectly? That kind of thing.
Right. Well, and that's it's so true with the kids because I've got two kids. They're now 15 and 13. And we started them out early with like, okay, if you want a snack, you can grab a piece of fruit anytime you want to. You don't even have to like ask for it, just go grab it. Like if you're hungry, you want something, get an orange, get an apple, banana, whatever you want. And I remember one time my son came out of bed and it was like he was like 9 or 10 and we were like, dude, you're supposed to be like, it was like an hour past his bedtime. I'm like, what are you doing? Well, I'm hungry. I'm like, no, go to bed. He goes, but you said I could have a piece of fruit anytime I want it. And I'm like, okay, get the apple, go back to bed. Like, but because like, how are you going to complain to that? Like, and I don't want to, like, I'm like, okay, if you're hungry and you're going to get an apple, go for it, right? Like, you're
Yeah.
not asking me for a candy bar, or, or something processed or something like that. Or so it's like, it's setting those habits and expectations early.
Yeah.
And they become ingrained. And people like now that we'll go over to have dinner with family friends or something, and they're just like, your kids eat vegetables. Like, how'd you do that? I'm like, we just started early.
Yeah.
Like, in like people think we're nuts, but my wife puts kale in the oven to make kale chips, and it comes out of the oven and it is gone within like 5 seconds. All of us are sitting there like, my kids are just downing it. And when we tell their friends, they're like, oh, they love kale. They're like, oh, y'all are weird. I'm like, well, sorry, but we're all healthy too. So
Yeah.
like,
And
and so
that
it is
and
weird.
it is weird. And everyone who uses that term, so in music, we're like, keep it weird. In finance with Dave Ramsey, he's like, weird is this,
Yep.
like normal is broke. It's like, yeah, the people who are weird, quote unquote, are the people who get, I have to be counterculture. Just
Yep.
because everyone is doing it doesn't mean that's the thing to do.
Yep.
We're not lemmings all walking off the cliff at the same time. It's like,
Right.
and you can do that. But it's like you realize, like with the baby, they're like, well, they only eat the fruit, they never eat the vegetables. Like, well, you can't just give them bananas. Like, if you give them that
Right.
sweetness, even with myself, if I have a cookie, it's like it feels like a movie. It feels like when you see the character where their eyes change and their eyes get like really
Hmm.
big and black. It feels like I
Yeah.
can I can feel the dopamine rush. Like that
Yeah.
was like a hit of
Yeah.
sugar, like boom. And sometimes you need them. Like I'm gonna go work out or go for a run or whatever.
Oh,
Yeah, for
sure.
sure. But it's like, but do I need that at or midnight when I'm not gonna
Right.
run, that kind of thing.
Right.
So for the kid, like, well, yeah, you said I can have an apple anytime, but like, is it a stalling tactic? Am I having trouble sleeping? Is there something on my mind? Like,
Right.
do I need water and that kind of thing? It's not, it's like, again, there's no right or wrong way. Like, maybe I do really am hungry. I didn't eat
Right.
much earlier and I do want the apple, but it's like, having that community allows you to have those teachable moments and
Hmm.
conversations. Because sometimes it could be, it is what it is, and it's fine. And then sometimes it's like,
Yeah.
oh, there's actually something else. And it's just like, again, digging a little bit deeper. But it's
Right.
like we can't be so superficial
Right.
in how we're, however we talk to ourselves or talk to others. It's just like we can't be afraid of being vulnerable. We also
Hmm.
can't be afraid of like, getting sticky. Like sometimes I'm like, hey, I only have one way to love, and sometimes it's gonna be abrasive. But I
Right.
mean well, and it's clunky, but when you need me, I'll be there, and I'm gonna go the distance.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, well, go the first mile. No, everyone can go the first mile. It's the second mile.
Yeah.
That's when people really need you, because that's where Critters Day has happened. Now we're
Right.
at Restart Day.
Yeah.
And so again, but being that parent, having that empathy love, like, yeah, you have an apple one night, fine. If it's like I need an apple every night, okay, are you
Yeah.
not eating
Different
enough? What's
story. Yeah.
happening? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. What's the stalling tactic? Um, but one of the things you said is so true in like that community in that vulnerability piece is like we all need somebody that we can, whether it's one person, two person, three person, what like that we can sit there and say, okay, look, tell me the truth. Am I way off? Am I right? Like because if we don't have that person, nobody's ever going to call us to the forefront and say, "Dude, you're eating too much. Dude, you're not exercising. Dude, your life is going down the wrong way." Whether it's alcohol or addiction or whatever, like if we're not vulnerable to tell people that that's what's going on, like we're going to wind up 4, 5, 6 steps down the road before we ever realize what's going on, and it's going to be a lot harder to change that at that point, right? Like if you had looked at your life and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm like 8 pounds overweight." Like, what's going on? Why am I gaining weight? What's going on? Like 8 pounds would have been probably a lot easier to lose than making that decision at 50 pounds, right?
yeah, no, definitely. And the thing is, it's like, one, was I even aware I was gaining weight? Like,
Yeah.
if I didn't have a scale, I never weighed myself. I only, like when you go to the doctor and you do an annual physical, you weigh yourself once a year. So you
Yeah.
have one opportunity a year to know that. When I started measuring myself every day, well, then you have 365 chances to
Right.
understand what's happening with you. And so, yeah, I think definitely if you realize it at 8 pounds and ask those questions, but a lot of times we're just so used to bulldozing through life or
Mhm.
stacking ourselves with other things that we're distracted. We're not really paying attention. Like that's why they say mindfulness. You don't want to eat and watch TV because you'll
Yeah.
just overeat. It's like, but so you having that, and that's why families when they eat together, it's like, oh, we don't have the TV up. We're just talking or whatever, because then you can actually pay attention. It's like if
Right.
everyone's on their phone, well, then we're not really there,
Yeah.
and you will miss these clues and things that are happening. So
Right.
yeah, I think definitely just having an overall mindfulness and doing it earlier. But even when you get to that point where you're like, well, I'm at the 50 pounds, it's like, okay, well, don't make it 51. Like, start figuring out what
Right.
you need to do
Yeah.
to make the changes. And I just tell people like with type 2 diabetes, like you have a way of knowing you have prediabetes and you're moving towards type 2 diabetes. But even before prediabetes, you have markers, but you have to go and get those tests. Sometimes
Right.
those tests are just, you have to know to ask for them because they're
Yeah.
not going to just give them to you and they may cost more and that kind of thing. But it's like, you want to know where you're going. And then now, when I was making my way back, we don't have proper terminology because from type 2 diabetes on the way back, it's still pre-diabetes. But
Uh,
now a guy, he made it post-diabetes because I need to show the arrow going this way is bad and the arrow going this
right.
way is good. And that
Yeah.
there is a way out,
Yeah.
but they don't talk about it that way, that it can be reversed. And not
Yeah.
everybody can do that. Some people need medication. I'm not saying you shouldn't do what you have
Right.
to do.
Yeah.
But while you're taking the medication, still make the healthy changes you can make.
Yeah.
It's like, when I was a kid, we would see all these Slim Fast commercials, and then my family would, eat ribs and then drink the Slim Fast. That doesn't work. Like,
Yeah.
if you're going to do the Slim Fast, do it and do the sensible meals. But what is
Right.
a sensible meal? And break that down,
Yeah.
how much that is and that kind of thing. So, if you're just like, well, I'll just take metformin and keep eating pie, that probably is not the best solution.
Right.
And the thing that I learned about medication, like with metformin, they're like, well, it takes, I thought it was making me get better, but it didn't. What happened is that it's just recycling the same thing around. It's like when you're in an airplane
Oh.
and the air is just recycling.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
basically, it forces the sugar that's in your bloodstream, forces it into the cell, but then the
Yeah.
cell can't really do anything with it because it's resistant. So it pushes it back. So it's just creating a loop. It's like in the short term, it'll kind of make your numbers better, but in the
Right.
long term, it won't make you like well.
Yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
still pumping yourself full of, simple carbohydrates and a lot of sugar and
Right.
stuff, like you'll still be effective. And so it's
Yeah.
just your body to heal. It's like, well, I have to eat differently and the intermittent fasting, it allows your body to absorb those extra nutrients because
Right.
you're giving it more time.
Yeah.
And our ancestors, they didn't eat that much. They
Right.
sometimes they just had one meal, and sometimes they didn't eat for a couple of days.
Right.
And you will be fine. Like when you tell people that I did a water fast for like 24 hours to start the new year on January 1st.
Yeah.
And people think, oh, I'm gonna be so hungry. I was like, yeah, but one day, like you won't even feel it because your body has so
Yeah.
much food from the days before and
Hmm.
fat in your body and stuff. It's like unless you're just like really anemic or really something, I was like, you won't even recognize it. Even people
Yeah.
that do like 2 or 3 days, I was like, it will take a
Yeah.
while if you're
Yeah.
staying hydrated for your body to realize like, oh, I
Yep.
haven't eaten. So it's like,
Yep.
it's not. But I think anytime you learn delayed gratification, I think that's a skill that
Hmm.
you can carry throughout all of life because
Yeah.
oh, and also like, do I want this? Do I need it? That difference of like,
That's a
am I
big difference.
actually
Yeah.
hungry? Do I
Yeah.
want do it's like, well, I need I need the apple. Do I need the apple pie? There's a
Right.
difference.
Right. Yeah.
I think what was it? One of the comedians, I think Louis C.K. or someone, but he was like, I don't even recognize it if it's not in a pie. Some people are
Yeah.
like that. There are places where they have farmers markets like in other neighborhoods. They have to educate. What is this? How do I cook this? 'Cause they've never seen a squash,
Right.
and I didn't realize that. So it's like, oh, yeah, you want people to eat healthy, but they need to know how. They
Yeah.
need to know. It's like it's no dig on them, but it's like some people they need a white glove extra hand holding for this
Right.
because they really don't know how to cook. They really
Yeah.
don't know where to start,
Yeah.
and that's when building the team is really helpful.
Right. Well, and just to touch on the fasting piece, because I'm a big believer in fasting, and some of the clients that I work with, like one of them specifically, this past fall, I was like, like week after week, I was like, dude, we need to do this. And he was like, oh, he's so nervous. He's so, and it's like, I can't do it. And I'm like, and he's easily got 50 pounds that he needs to lose still. And I'm like, dude, you have stored energy. Like that's what it's there for. That's how the body works. You ate too much, you stored it to be used in the future. It's okay. Like, but it was so foreign to him because he was so taught like you eat at this time every day, right? Like you eat breakfast at this time, you eat lunch at this time, you eat dinner at this time, you have dessert, you eat it. And he was like, how do I go without eating? And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then he finally did. He went 72 hours, so 3 full days. And he got done and he was like, I feel like I can do anything in the world now. I'm like, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
like, and you feel energized? He's like, yeah, I've got energy. I'm fine, I'm good. I was like, and since that one 3 day fast, he's done 2 day fasts like 3 or 4 other times. He's like, yeah, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and I felt so good last time. I'm gonna try it again. And yeah, it's amazing what your body can do when you get past those preconceived notions that
Mhm.
society has just told us, you know,
Yeah.
and whether it's food related or exercise related or business related or just success related, like
Mhm.
once you get past those preconceived notions, it's amazing what your body and mind will let you do.
Yeah. And I think when you're thinking of like with this client you're talking about, the person you're working with, well, who taught you that? And what was their health like?
Hmm.
And did that work for them? You know, like
Yeah,
Dr. Phil's like, how's that working out for you? You have to ask that because it's like, well, if everyone in my family is big and everyone ate that way, it's like, well, what's the 180? Who isn't doing that? And what are they doing?
yeah,
And that's what I need to do, you know, because
right.
that's working. Now, if it's working, then it's not working for you. That's something to assess. But I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's pretty clear when you think about it. Like, well, everyone I knew that ate, you know, the square meals
Hmm.
and always had dessert, well, they probably were pretty big. So then it's like, well, that probably is a correlation there. I need to dig, you know, it's like,
Yeah,
did I need that? Like some people, they're like, well, never skip breakfast. If you're not hungry, I say don't. You know,
yeah,
it's whatever. You can break your fast whenever. At the same time, I've realized now, like I used to have these huge breakfasts, and they do say to eat like that, but sometimes I'm like, actually, the middle of the day is my biggest meal because
right.
that's when I feel I need it, and
Yeah.
I don't want to have it too late. But I'm not hungry like that even
Hmm.
after a couple hours. I have a coffee. I'm like, I don't, you know, I might have like a little something on the side, but not like a
Yeah,
full. I'm not ready for a full meal. So I
right.
think that's like kind of how you figure out what works. But then when you actually do it and your stomach starts to shrink, if you wake up and you have like a boiled egg, you just feel full. It's
Yeah,
like you have protein first, that kind of thing. It burns longer and cleaner.
right,
It's like, you know, people get it. Like, why would you get a hybrid thinking that that's a better energy to burn? But you're not making the hybrid of your body to
right,
burn cleaner,
right.
better. And you
Yeah,
could, you know. And
yeah,
and and, and it's also like certain things about like how are you eliminating? Do you go every day? Like
right.
that's something you have to figure out. Oh, I'm stressed a lot and I'm not going. Well, it's like, well, then you have to deal with that stress because not eliminating is also going to help you not get toxins out of your body and other stuff
Right,
like that. So it's just you just little things. The thing that is tough is that there's so many little things. It's like
right.
really there's a lot of things, but
Yeah.
you can autopilot a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
And now that this person has done the fasting and now incorporated, that's the integration because they thought they couldn't, then they did, and they realized what they thought wasn't actually what it was. But you
Right.
don't know that until you've done it. So
Yeah.
you have to, that's why I feel like test it and see it. You ate that and it worked, you did that and it didn't. Keep a journal, figure out, oh, that was
Yeah.
cool, that was like not great. Or like, oh, this really didn't work for me because like the meal prep was just insane. I can't do it. Okay,
Yeah.
then 50-50 it, you know?
Yeah.
Make your breakfast at home and eat out at dinner healthfully, like if that's what you want to do, or vice versa. Like make
Yeah.
it work for you that you can stick with it and it's not so difficult that it's just too hard.
Yeah. Well, and you alluded to this earlier too, is that like, things change over time, right? You read a book 10 years from then, you're going to get different thing from it. If you eat something and you didn't like it 10 years later, guess what? Your taste buds change and you may appreciate it, right?
Uh-huh.
And sometimes it's your body saying, wait a minute, I really crave this, that, or the other thing, like from a mineral standpoint, from a vitamin standpoint, in in the taste changes, right? And so it's like, just going off of and how people prepare it, right? Because like, okay, well maybe grandma prepared it one way and you didn't like that because she added something you didn't know to it that made it taste a little funny. And so like, but all of a sudden that's just off my list for the rest of my life.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
prepare it differently and try it again.
Yeah, you definitely have to try it again. And if you know it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't. But then you find the alternative. In the
Yeah,
same way, like you may have something that served you great for 10 years. You may be
right.
every time I did lose weight, I cut carbs and it's great. And then at 40, it doesn't. So
Yeah.
you have to realize that your body has changed. Something in the environment has changed. Something has
Mhm.
changed where, oh, I need to step it up in a different way. Doesn't mean
Right,
that way isn't good, but it's just not serving you the way it did the 10
right,
years prior. Because
right.
something has changed. We all evolve and
Yeah.
and 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 as you get older, you're gonna have different constraints. You're like, well,
Mhm.
I wasn't ready for it. You weren't because 10 years ago you didn't have that constraint, and you
Mhm.
wouldn't be ready for it until you have it. But now your body can adapt, and you
Yeah.
have to do other stuff. So yeah, I think it's like all those things of like trying different things and getting used to it. I mean, I always go and oh, I never had that. Let me try it. And I'm like, sometimes it's amazing and it becomes my new favorite thing, and sometimes like, oh, this is not for me. But at
Yeah.
least I know I put it out there, and knowing that again, as your
Right.
taste buds change, try it again. Every 5, 7 years, or
Yeah.
try it when you're at a different place who prepares it differently, as you were
Mhm.
saying, because it could be. I mean, there's definitely like things like liver and onions. I never got taste for it,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I still
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah. There's definitely stuff out there. But and one of the things I love that you said, and because it reminds me of something that I don't know if you know who Lewis Howes is, but I've listened to his
Hmm.
podcast, and one of the things that he says when it comes to money is like money will come to you when you're ready for it. And I heard Dave Ramsey talk about that too. It's like money will come to you when you're ready for it. And so like if you're not ready and you're not prepared, and you can see this in, people that win the lottery, like I think it's like 75 or 80% of people who win the lottery are broke within 5 years. And this is like the big numbers, like the 7 million, the 15 million, the 35 million. Like they could be set for life and then they're
Hmm.
broke in 5 years because they weren't ready for it,
Oh yeah, no,
you know?
definitely. When I was studying to get my MBA at Pepperdine, we had a person who had basically went to jail for a white collar crime Ponzi scheme come to talk to us about ethics. And what he said was, he felt bad, he felt remorseful, but the point was, he was like, the time to make the decision on what you'll do in an ethical dilemma is way before you're presented
Hmm.
with the problem. You have
Yeah,
to have already decided, I'm an ethical person. I wouldn't do that before it comes, because otherwise it's
right.
too easy. So you have to decide before the food is in front of you, what's the
Hmm.
healthy choice? Or
Yeah.
what's the fitness choice, or what's the financial choice that
Mhm.
makes sense for me? You have to do it in advance. And that the forward thinking of it is what makes it helpful. So it won't go where it's not invited. And
Mhm.
as you have to go against all these preconceived notions, there are people like with money, there was a guy who was like, if I brought my little grandchild, I'm like, I love my little grandchild. I kissed it. Everyone's like, oh, he's like, if I brought like a big bag of money and I kissed it, people are like, oh, that's gross. It's like, because you have now trained yourself that money is bad and money will not
Right.
come where it's not invited, so you're not going to get that. And
Yeah.
that's the same way with people who have a fear of success or a fear of being skinny. Oh, well,
Hmm.
people may look at me there. You won't get there because you can't invite it because your mind is telling you don't do that because you're
Yeah.
going to ostracize someone or make them feel better, whatever. And you have to deal with those notions
Yeah.
to be like, you know, maybe someone said something and it triggered me. And with what's her name, Karen Carpenter. Karen Carpenter
Hmm.
became anorexic because she was in the background. They put her in the foreground. One reviewer said, "Oh, she's the fat sister," and she
Yeah.
developed the complex. Then she literally never ate again.
Yeah.
And people need to be able to the community helps you kind of check that stuff.
Hmm.
Oh, you don't have to worry about that. If she felt vulnerable to talk about it, which she didn't,
Yeah.
even working with her brother and her family. So it's like those pressures, and you see that with a lot of eating
Oh
disorders and
yeah.
stuff. So it's just like one of those things where the mind is so powerful and it
Hmm.
wants to protect you. And sometimes it protects you from yourself where you can't even know what you're doing and why.
Right.
At the same time, when you see all these things that are ingrained in you, like Zig Ziglar, he has this great experience where he's talking about his wife always cuts the end of the ham off. And she's like, well, why do you do that? He's like, well, my mom always did it. So they go to mama. He's like, mama, why do you cut the end of the ham off? And she's like, I don't know. My grandma always did it. And they go to grandma. And they're like, grandma, why do you always cut the end of the ham off? And she's like, I don't know why you guys are doing it. I had a small roaster, you know?
Right.
So it's like they were now all doing this thing, having these big roasters that could support more.
Right.
And that's how we are. We can all support more now
Right.
than we could, but we don't because we're trained to think small. We're
Yeah.
trained to stay in the homeostasis. And the same way Tony Robbins, I've done UPW and stuff with him. He was like,
Mhm.
people are sometimes like a thermostat. So if you're like, oh, I'm at 70 degrees, when I dip to 60, something will kick in will say, no, I have to be at 70. But at the same time, if I somehow upswing to 90, I'll kick
Yeah.
an AC on and be like, I gotta get down to 70. I'm a 70. But it's like,
Right.
no, you have to now increase. I'm a 90 now.
Right.
So that homeostasis, that center is different. And so when you do that with health, when you get healthy, now it's like, oh no, I'm a healthy person. Like now people in AA and stuff, they're like, oh, I'm an alcoholic. I don't say it that way. I'm always like, I don't drink. I'm a person who doesn't drink.
Right.
I became different.
Yeah.
So then, like, you're not going to tempt me because I'm not tempted because I'm not crutching on that thing in that way
Right.
I did before.
Right.
And say it how whatever verbiage you want, but for me, it's all about the being. You know, like
Hmm.
I would never murder a person. I'm not a murderer. I don't have that malice in me and stuff, and
Right.
so I don't worry about it because it would never happen. It just isn't a
Yeah.
thing, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, when you become a person who's like, I eat clean, then you're not worried about like, oh, I need to avoid McDonald's. You're just not going to go in there because
Right.
there's nothing in there for me, you know,
Right.
and you just keep on walking by.
Yep.
And there's so many great choices out there that can be healthy, and a lot of places are doing it great. You just have to like look for those blogs that are consolidating information and
Hmm.
reading the reviews and go try some stuff and cook it at home. Like
Right.
if you want to go to restaurants, but use it as a learning opportunity to say, when I cook it at home, I'm going to do this, and I want to make these changes. When I go on recipe sites, it's always someone like, here's the recipe, and then all the comments are like, I omitted this, I added this. Everybody
Right.
wants to put
Yep.
their spin on it, and that's
Yep.
the fun of it. And when you do that with the kids, they get to learn, like, oh, I have choices.
Yeah.
I would like, I want currants instead of raisins. Yeah, me
Hmm.
too, because I don't like raisins. So it's like you have them, and I like cranberries.
Yeah.
So it's like there's so many ways of doing that, and
Oh yeah.
so like I said, there's no right or wrong way, but when you're out at the restaurant, learn what you can do, and then say like for me, I used to go out and get pancakes all the time, and I found out like why I can make that easy. Like
Yeah.
that's so cheap. I was like
Yeah.
I will make pancakes at home, and then I'll go out for like a steak or something that I'm not gonna cook, you
Hmm.
know, or it makes
Yeah.
sense for them to do it because they really do it that well. Or
Right.
certain types of ethnic foods, I'm like it never tastes the same. You know,
Yeah.
like Brussels sprouts, I can make them at home and they're great, but restaurants always make them better. So it's like
Right.
I'd rather just have those
Yeah.
out and that kind of thing. But you
Yeah.
know, that's how you learn. You're like, oh, I'm
Hmm.
really great at this. I can nail breakfast, and that's your thing. And then
Yeah.
maybe your wife's like, I can nail lunch, awesome. And then we go out at dinner, and then we
Yeah.
you learn from dinner to be like, hey, let's try a couple meals at home,
Right.
see how it goes, you know, and then
Yep.
we'll report back. The kids will
Right.
tell you their
Oh
feedback
yeah.
form is on.
Oh yeah. That's true. But you know, in the mind, I love the mindset piece of who you are, right? And like saying who you are, because I do the same thing in, you know, and I try to help people understand to do that as well. And a great example I've got is because both of our kids are adopted, and one of the things that we learned really early was to tell them that they were adopted. Like that was something that happened in the past. There was a moment in time we went in front of a judge, they signed the papers and said, "You're now their kid. They're, you know, they're adopted." They were adopted. Now they're our kids, right? Like they're our family. They're not, it's not something that's like, oh, you're just the adopted. You know, it's like, no, they were adopted. Now they're our kids. And it's the same mindset that we need to have of like, you know, especially when we, because in correct me if I'm wrong, but from an addiction standpoint, if we tell ourselves, oh, I'm so addicted to this, I'm so addicted to this, it makes it that much harder to overcome it versus just
Mm-hmm.
to say, I am not, I am a person who no longer drinks.
Yes.
Right? I may be
Yeah.
on day one, I may be on day 200, but at some point I've got to make that decision that, okay, I'm no longer a person that drinks as of today and move forward with that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, it's like the mentality of you can either succumb or overcome. You can
Hmm.
be a victim or a victor, but you cannot be both at the same time and occupy the
Right.
same space. And so you're either sober or you're alcoholic, like in that
Yeah.
regard.
Yeah.
And so I think the tough thing is that with alcohol, with drugs, it's pretty clear cut. This
Hmm.
person has a problem.
Yeah.
But eating, and even with alcohol, like when things are normalized and everyone's doing it, like as a musician, everybody drinks. Like a lot of people
Right.
drink
Yeah.
around me. So it's like you become the anomaly to not. And so when it's normalized, you and everyone's doing it, you don't notice how much and how
Mhm.
often and really care because
Yeah.
nobody is checking that. They're like, well, that's what you do. So then with eating, like people eat themselves to death, you know. It's a slower process in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, but it does
Yeah.
happen, you know. And so, and a lot of cancers and stuff are linked to like what you're eating
Oh
and stuff
yeah.
too.
Oh yeah.
And so I think it's just, yeah, the becoming, the being, and you feel better. You build so much esteem,
Yeah.
self-esteem when you really conquer those challenges in your life. And when you cultivate a discipline, like for me, cultivating a discipline in music made me a fairly disciplined person to practice. And you practice day in and day out, and you practice when you feel like it, and you practice when you don't. Like that's,
Yeah.
you know, the sun shines and it rains. Like it happens. And so
Yeah.
when you are working then on not drinking, like that helped me build a discipline to cut an area of my life that led me then to focus on food.
Mhm.
Because I wouldn't have done it all at once. But then when you have years under your belt, like, wow, I really had a success in that area. What's the next thing that I want to conquer? This is it.
Right.
Let's do that. But if I tried to do the both at the same time, I would have shot myself in the foot because one or the other, I would have found a crutch somewhere.
Yeah.
I would have leaned on one or the other. So I
Yeah.
definitely think people, there's this saying of like, what's killing you the most? Like when you go into something, like it's probably more than one thing. Like it's
Right.
probably I'm dealing with alcohol and I also have an anger problem. But anger is not killing you today. So we're gonna focus on alcohol today. And
Right.
when you get up the road on that, we'll do other things. So I think that's
Yeah.
what people learn is that like it is overwhelming if you're like, I want to be everything everywhere at once. That's not
Mhm.
good. I think like what's killing you today, let's get to the triage to stop the bleeding or what's bleeding
Right.
the most. And then we'll go to the next and then the next. And then
Right.
eventually you build momentum. Like Dave Ramsey with the jet snowball, you start
Yep.
building momentum of doing the smallest ones and then knocking that out, adding it to the next, adding it to the next. And then eventually like, oh wow, I paid these things off much faster because I built the habits on the smaller ones.
Right. And that's all it is habits, right? It's all it is. It's like stacking the habits and making those habit changes and whether it's you're attacking the ones that are easiest to do or you're attacking the ones like you said, the ones that's killing me today, like the most dangerous. Like I got to get to a point where then I can go to the easiest, right? But I can't just go to the easiest now because this other stuff is killing me and I got to get to a better place first.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it all comes from just changing those habits of what you're doing on a daily basis.
Definitely, and the hardest task first is a lot in productivity, like Brian Tracy,
Mhm.
eat that frog, If that's
Yep.
the worst part of your day, well, then it got done early, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. So it's like, that's
Yeah.
why people exercise in the morning. Sets the
Mhm.
tone for the rest of the day. It's like, maybe I won't have that candy bar because I just did the workout,
Yeah.
I really want to stay on track.
Right.
And if you don't, then it's a little bit different. But that's why I tell people like, if you wake up in the morning and you do it, great. If somehow you miss it, do it later. I used to
Yeah.
work out sometimes at 11 o'clock at night if that's what
Yeah.
I had to do. And so it's like, fit it in where you get it in. And some of the time is better than no time. If you can only
Right.
do 30 minutes of an hour, then do 30. You don't do 15, then do 15. Build the consistency, build the habit.
Yeah.
But it's better to do 15 than none. And
Yeah.
then it's like, oh, I kind of ate the wrong thing. Scale change. Okay, cool. Then tomorrow, I wrote in my journal, I learned and do it differently the next
Mhm.
day. But get right back on it. It's
Yeah.
the same with recovery. If someone takes a drink, no shame. Come back, work the plan, get back
Right.
on the road. We're not
Yeah.
gonna be like, well, just keep drinking and fall down the slope. Well, that's not
Right.
good. So
Yeah.
if it's okay to have some mess ups. You're gonna have them, the little blips over time, but it's like just don't make that a habit. Like,
Right.
don't make the same mistake twice. Let's
Yep.
figure it out. Come
Yep.
talk to your sponsor. Come talk to somebody. Come talk to your coach.
Yep.
Come talk to a friend. Oh, okay, that kind of helped me get some perspective, that kind of thing.
Yep. Yep. So, Cliff, I want to give you an opportunity to let people know how they can follow you. How can they like learn more about what you're doing, both from music side, author side, everything that you're doing?
Awesome. Well, all my social media is the easiest way to find me at Cliff Beach Music. And then in terms of the book, byhustleandflow.net is my website. I have a blog on there. So we're trying to
Cool.
post articles and just give people more information. Success, motivation, inspiration, health, fitness, like they're all kind of interrelated. They
Yeah.
seem like they'd be like, oh, they're, music and creativity has nothing to do with anything else. But I don't think so. I think we're all creative people. I
Yeah.
think children start off very creative. I think somehow society beats it out of us. We're afraid
Hmm.
to be weird, as you said, or to look
Yeah.
foolish. But it's like the weird people and the foolish people are the people you admire. That's who they build statues to. That's who becomes someone to emulate
Yeah.
in certain ways. But at the same time, you have to look at people like some of my favorite musicians had tragic lives
Oh, yeah.
outside of that. So like
Yeah.
you can't just build one area of your life. It's a wheel of life and many things. And
Hmm.
so the integration and the balance is like, how do I get multiple systems of things to work? Knowing that I'm not going to be able to get all the frogs in the basket forever at once. I mean,
Right.
that's just life. But
Yeah.
how can I just do the best that I can with what I have, knowing that I want to continually increase my best? I think can I? Constant and never ending improvement.
Yeah.
Why, if you're here, are you not being useful? And usefulness keeps usefulness. That keeps
Mhm.
me young.
Yep.
Being out there, trying to be better. It's like, well, I'm 42, and people are like, we don't look 42. It's like, good. I'm not trying to look
Right.
42.
Right. Yeah. Nobody wants to look old, right? And
Yeah,
there's ways to prevent it.
definitely. I mean, just let your body do what it's designed to do best.
Yeah.
Like, get out of your body's way.
Yep.
Because, like the animals do it. If I put a Twinkie down, the squirrels, they just crawl over it. They don't even see it as food.
Yeah.
And so you shouldn't either. If your
Right.
grandma and great grandma didn't think it was food, it probably isn't
Right. Yep.
food
Very
science.
true. Very true. So, well, Cliff, I want to thank you so much for being a guest. It's been a great conversation.
Oh, it's been amazing, Jerry. I hope we get to talk again. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks for checking out the Confidence Through Health podcast. Please subscribe, post a review, share this episode with those you love who need a little extra help with their health journey. Visit allinhealthandwellness.com to learn more about the coaching programs that I provide. All episodes are produced by the Social Media Cowboys, your source for all online marketing needs. Go to socialmediacowboys.com for more information.